Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Also, if you're into fantasy sports, football, baseball, basketball, right, the promo code for deep discounts for new accounts at fanduel.com is Dwyer777. Right, give yourself a break, save some money. Now let's talk about Andre Ward against Sergey Kovalev. Let me just say, in my opinion, those of you who place wagers on sports need to watch this fight, but stay away from it, right? Know when to say when. In other words, you definitely want to, as a sports fan, watch this match. But in my opinion, you're not going to get clarity before the match on who's going to win it. This is that rare match where really it's hard to figure out, right? I know I'm going to stay on the sidelines here. There are those events where, quite frankly, your money is better spent staying in your wallet. Let's talk about the red flags in this fight, and they're all over the place. Right, first, John David Jackson. Now, of all the fighters out there, and I know there are mixed opinions on this, mine is pretty firm on this point. The fighter who, to me, most equates to Andre Ward is Bernard Hopkins. Right? Let's talk about Andre Ward for a second. Then I'm going to get back to John David Jackson. Right? Andre Ward, to me, reminds me of Drew Brees, the quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. In other words, Ward doesn't dazzle you with blinding hand speed. He doesn't dazzle you with astonishing power. He's not a fighter who you look at and you say, okay, I know what his competitive advantage is. Right? By contrast with Kovalev, the first time you see Kovalev, his power leaps out at you, right? Grabs you. When I look at Manny Pacquiao, right, his hand speed grabs you. You look at the guy and you say, oh, this is different. Oh, I know this guy is talented. With Andre Ward, it's different. It's like Drew Brees, right? Drew Brees is not the biggest man. Drew Brees doesn't have the great arm, right? He doesn't have the big arm. He's not Big Ben. He doesn't have the big body. He's not running over linemen like, let's say, Andrew Luck, right? He's not that mobile in the pocket. When I look at him, I don't think of Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. But yet, I once lost a bet. Drew Brees was in the Super Bowl. I remember this vividly. I made a bet that Drew Brees would complete less than 70% of his passes. 70. What bet could possibly be easier than that? Wasn't he going up against a Super Bowl defense? And Drew Brees, without the big arm, without the great legs, without the big size, went out there and put on one of the best performances I've seen in my life in a Super Bowl. Right? He'd mastered the mental side of the sport. He puts together the pieces in such a way that it works, that you understand that this quarterback is one of the best quarterbacks of our lifetimes. Right? Not surprisingly, there's a certain level of consistency. Look at the number of games in a row that Drew Brees threw for a touchdown. Same thing with Andre Ward. There's a certain level of consistency. Right? Understand, Andre Ward, according to reports, didn't lose a match in the amateurs. Right? Andre Ward hasn't lost a match as a pro. You're talking about a guy in his 30s who hasn't lost a match since he was a teenager. And if you're keeping track, this is a guy who right? At one point, fought the light heavyweight champion Chad Dawson. At another point, participated in the Super 6 contest and fought people like Carl Froch in that contest. Right? Andre really hasn't been doing it the easy way. He's been taking on A-list opposition, and yet the guy hasn't lost. Right? Really, when we look back on this era, we're going to realize that Andre Ward has been one of the dominant fighters for several years. Right? Several years. So, you're not going to get rich. Hell, you might end up in the poorhouse betting against Andre Ward. One of the lessons I've learned in life is when you see a dominant athlete, right? When you see a guy who has a level of success and consistency, and you look at the guy and you realize that it's hard to put your finger on what the guy does best, right? When you come across a Greg Maddux, right? I understand in basketball, the first pick in this year's draft, Ben Simmons, is this way. And you come across a guy who, is amazingly good, but yet doesn't have a spectacular fastball. Right, is literally getting by on the art of his craft. Right? For Greg Maddux, it's baseball. For Andre Ward, it's boxing. Right? Then you need to be very afraid of that athlete. You need to be very mindful and very respectful of that athlete. Now let's talk about John David Jackson. Right? John David Jackson knows Bernard Hopkins. Hopkins is a pivotal figure in all this because I personally consider Hopkins to be, in a sense, Andre Ward's uncle. Right? Just like when I look at Golovkin, quite frankly, I see Julio Cesar Chavez. When I look at Andre Ward, I see Bernard Hopkins. Right? These guys, same type thing. These are the Greg Madduxes. These are the Drew Breeses of the sport of boxing. Right? Well, understand John David Jackson not only fought Hopkins, right? Who knows Hopkins better in the ring than the guys who were in the ring with him? Right? He not only fought Hopkins, but he worked for years. Let me underline that, years, in Hopkins' corner with Nassim Richardson. Right? He's a guy who has seen how Hopkins prepares. He knows what Hopkins does inside, both as an opponent and as an assistant trainer. He knows what Hopkins is bringing to the table. He knows what savvy Drew Brees guys do in the ring. Right? I believe he probably knows Andre Ward better than most of the trainers of most of Ward's opponents. Right? So, to me, there's a level of familiarity here from a style perspective that bothers me. Right? With Andre Ward, it's technical brilliance. I don't like the idea that the opposing trainer, right, has been privy to and around technical brilliance for a lot of his life. Right? Also, I look at guys who John David Jackson trains, and they're doing a lot of interesting things, right? I consider Chris Algieri's fight. I know Algieri had a car crash against Errol Spence, but I consider his fight against Amir Khan to be one of the better thought out fights that I've seen recently. So to me, John David Jackson's one of those trainers you need to keep an eye on, just like you need to keep an eye on Robert Garcia and Abel Sanchez and, a bunch of other trainers in the sport, right? Emmanuel Stewart back in the day, Freddie Roach, right? These are trainers who, when I see them in a guy's corner, I'm thinking, ooh, this guy's prepared. This guy's going to come in here and he's going to have a strategy. This guy didn't show up to train for the fight yesterday. He's actually been thinking about the fight for months. He's gotten good advice. So, I expect Kovalev to be amazingly prepared for Andre Ward. More prepared than most of the other guys Ward has fought. Right? Both of these guys have problems. Both of them have problems. Let's talk about the problems Andre Ward has for a moment. Then I'll get to the problems Kovalev has. Right? Andre Ward, I know he beat Chad Dawson. Y'all know I hate catch weights. I hate catch weights. Did I say I hate catch weights? Right? I don't consider that fight to have been for the light heavyweight title. Right? I don't care what's in the official books and all that. Come on now. You know what I mean? If I'm going to bet my money, I really care about what my eyes say. Chad Dawson wasn't Chad Dawson in that fight. He looked like a guy who, quite frankly, needed a meal. Right? Now, Ward's had fights at 175, including a big mismatch against Alexander Brand. Right? I didn't see the big power at 175. Right? Ward didn't have big power at 168. Now he's at 175. Right? Because I question Ward's power at 175, he has a smaller margin of error, doesn't he, than does Kovalev in this fight. In other words, Ward has to be technically great to win this fight. Right, doesn't he? Kovalev could come in and be technically sloppy. Right? Punchers have a huge margin of error. All he has to do is hit you upside the head in the right spot once or twice, and he could well win the fight by KO. You might not be able to answer the count. Andre Ward doesn't have that margin of error. Another issue I have are his recent performances. Right? He's not coming off of a victory over Carl Froch, is he? Right? No, he's coming off of a victory over Alexander Brand. Right? I thought he looked a little shaky. I thought he looked rusty in the Sullivan-Barrera fight. Now, I know people like Jim Lampley were fawning over him during the telecast. Sometimes you've just got to get out of your seat, go to the TV, and turn off the volume as you watch a fight. Right? Understand, many of these announcers are adjuncts of the TV cable station that has a contract with the fighter. Right? They're trying to sell you whatever's being sold during commercials, right? Whatever, corporate sponsors have paid. Right? And so, all I'm saying is this. I've seen Andre Ward fight several times. The Andre Ward who beat Sullivan-Barrera was rusty. Right? Let me say, Alexander Brand, forget about his record. Look at what the guy actually did in the ring. Look at his fight style. Look at his center of gravity. Andre Ward should have beaten him. Right? So, from Andre Ward's recent performances, I'm not reassured that this is the Andre Ward of the Super 6 tournament. Let's talk about that Super 6 tournament. Folks, it was so long ago that many of the guys are retired. If you see Carl Froch these days, he's likely wearing a collared shirt and tie and jacket. Right? Announcing fights. He's part of, a boxing broadcast team. Right? He's not in the ring. Jermaine Taylor, wow. He's way out of the ring, isn't he? Alan Green, I don't know where he is. These are guys who were in the Super 6. Mikael Kessler, isn't he retired? Do the math. The Super 6 was 2010, 2011. Boxing's a young man's game. Boxing has a hard time remembering what happened more than half an hour ago. Right? And so, put it this way. I'd take prime Andre Ward over Sergey Kovalev. I just don't know if this is prime Andre Ward. Right? Let me say this too, a few other things. This fight's in Vegas. Right? Andre Ward's a guy who loves to fight at home. He loves Oakland. He's Bay Area. Hey, I'm in the Bay Area. Right? I love the Bay Area. Vegas is a different place entirely. Hey, I love Vegas too, but when I go to Vegas, I know I'm not in Oakland. Right? I know I'm not in San Jose. Right? Or San Francisco. And so you're going to have a lot of newness. Right? You don't get to train at your favorite gym in town. You're actually in Las Vegas. Different world. Different gym. Different crowd. Right? You don't have a Bay Area crowd where you can look at them and say, hey, it's the Bay, and then have a bunch of Bay Area celebrities at the fight. You know, here's Marshawn Lynch, you know, who was raised in Oakland. You know, here's some Warriors. Right? In Vegas, it's different, isn't it? Right? Let me say, too, that Kovalev really has looked good, hasn't he? Right? While we have doubts on whether, you know, Andre Ward is still at the top of his game, with Kovalev, you don't really have that many doubts. I know he didn't look that good against Ike Chilemba. Right? But against Ike Chilemba, I remember Ike getting up off the canvas in that fight. Right? You knew Kovalev still had power. Right? Chilemba's a guy who's been around, who's been in some tough matches. Wow, did Ike look hurt and shaky getting off the canvas there. That fight, too, was a fight where Kovalev was going back home. You know the way it is. A lot of people, when they go back home, aren't as sure of themselves, especially when they've spent their careers fighting on the road. Kovalev's kind of like a reverse Andre Ward, isn't he? Ward's fought a lot at home. Kovalev's fought on the road. When the road guy goes back home, hey, it's a little bit shaky. Right? Suddenly, you're in front of your people and you're thinking, hey, I need to put on an extra special show. The problem is you're in against a world-class fighter who, as you try to overcompensate, is taking advantage of your over-aggression. Right? So I'll say this. I think Kovalev is more on the top of his game right now based on what I've seen than Andre Ward is. Right? That concerns me. Let's talk about Kovalev's problems. Right? One of my favorite fights ever, and people really have forgotten it. There was a time when Razor Ruddock was really viewed as one of the baddest men on the planet. He was a badass. Right? He took on Lennox Lewis. Now, Razor Ruddock had a habit. By the way, Kovalev has this habit. Right? Razor Ruddock liked to hit you with a very stiff jab to your body. He would be up here, then he'd lean down, and he would hit you to the body. Right? The idea was he was going to invest shots in your midsection and take it away from you. So later in the fight, you're huffing and puffing. The problem was he was in with Lennox Lewis. And Lewis came in waiting for him. If you look at the tape, I think it's clear. Lewis is waiting for him to bend over and go to the body. Let's line it up. What hand do you jab with? It's typically your left hand if you're a righty. Right? So when you see a guy who jabs to the body effectively, often, right? Like Razor Ruddock used to back in the day. If the other guy is ready, understand as you bend over and stick out your left hand, you're open for a right hand at this angle. Lennox Lewis hit him with that right hand. Right? Think about it too. If the shot lands around your temple area, that could wreck your balance the entire fight. Let's just say Razor Ruddock wasn't the same after that punch. Lewis wins that fight by KO. Now granted, Lennox Lewis, bigger puncher than Andre Ward. But here, Kovalev jabs with one hand. I know he's a two-handed fighter, but he jabs with one hand. You're looking at film, you're looking for an edge. He jabs with his left hand. He likes to jab to the body. Go back and look at countless Kovalev fights. Kovalev against Pascal, Kovalev against Hopkins. When Kovalev bends over, Kovalev doesn't like to get too close to you. Right? He likes to have a cushion between you. Some of that's the other guy moving away. Some of that is Kovalev moving away. He likes a cushion. So understand, his way to hit the body, he doesn't want to completely invest himself. He doesn't want to jump in the pocket and throw hooks to the body. No, he wants to stay away, and he wants to politely bend down and hit you with a left jab to the body. If Andre Ward times it, he's going to have several opportunities in this fight, to jump in with a right hand up top to hit Kovalev in the temple. Right? That concerns me. Right? A superstar like Andre Ward knows how to exploit things like that. Right? That's a problem to me. The other problem, too, is, there are Ward fights. The Edison Miranda fight, for example, where Andre Ward decides he's going to come inside. Right? And when he comes inside, and people forget, Miranda, huge puncher. When he comes inside and smothers an opponent, sometimes that opponent doesn't know what to do. Now, I know John David Jackson is saying, hey, Ward's not as savvy as Bernard Hopkins. If Ward comes inside, he's going to try to hold. If he tries to hold, Kovalev is going to hit him with some pretty good shots to slow him down. I'm not sure about that. Because the Kovalev I see generates power by having his feet apart. It's kind of like Adrian Broner, right? He has his feet set. He has a stance that allows him to generate power. If you collapse the pocket and lean on him and make his feet go from this to this, if you get his feet horizontal, right, on the same plane, is he going to have the same level of power? Kovalev's a master of stepping into punches, isn't he? Right? If you collapse the pocket and get inside on him, is he even going to have that power? I don't know. I'll agree that he stands in a way that makes it hard to get totally inside on him. But Bernard Hopkins never really pushed the issue. But Bernard, of course, was 49 years old. Here you have a younger guy, younger than Bernard, right, who might be able to push the issue. And so, I'll just put it to you this way. This is a great fight. It's a great fight, but I'm personally going to be on the sidelines on it. I don't feel comfortable betting on either fighter. Right? Ward still looks rusty to me. Hasn't hopped in the ring with anyone remotely approaching Sergey Kovalev of late. Right? Kovalev, by contrast, looks a little bit vulnerable to me with all these jabs to the body. Let me say this too. The Bernard Hopkins fight, Kovalev found out that he could hit Hopkins with high right hands. Look at the tape of the fight. Right? So a lot of that fight is him knowing that Hopkins was going to roll away like this and him hitting Hopkins on the side of the head. Right? If Andre Ward puts a hand up right? Ward's excellent defensively. If he puts a hand up and neutralizes Kovalev's right hand, that's going to make the fight a lot more competitive. A lot more competitive than Kovalev's fight against Bernard Hopkins. I'll say this too. Look at the CompuBox for Hopkins-Kovalev. Now Hopkins, granted, hardly throws any punches. But when you look at the CompuBox numbers, you're going to be amazed at the level of accuracy. Right? Let me also add too that Kovalev in fights at times gets off balance, doesn't he? Right? The Blake Caparello fight, he's hit, he's down in that fight. We know Darnell Boone dropped him as well. Now I know John David Jackson is trying to question Andre Ward's chin. How did that chin hold up against Carl Froch? Right? I mean, if you're going to go back to Darnell Boone to talk about Ward being wrong, understand Darnell Boone dropped both of these guys. Right? Ward doesn't have to go back that far to question Kovalev's chin, because Kovalev was on the canvas against Caparillo. By the way, that fight's troubling because Caparillo's a southpaw. Andre Ward, unlike Kovalev, who's wedded to righty, people need to understand that Andre Ward is really a switch. Right? He's righty and lefty. He just saw a left-handed guy give Kovalev some problems. Right? So for me, this fight is over my head. Simply put, the more I look at film and stuff, the more confused I am. Right? This is the kind of fight where you wake up on Monday and you say, oh, you know what, Kovalev, he's in his prime. Andre looks rusty. If I had to bet, if I had a gun to my head, I'd go Kovalev. Then you wake up on Tuesday and you're like, man, Kovalev has had moments in the ring where he's looked shaky. Right? Took him a while to figure out Agnew. Right? Wow, against Ike Chilemba, he did look tired in the later rounds. How do I know he's not going to be winded and vulnerable? When has he gone the distance? Against a 49-year-old? Against Ike Chilemba, after Chilemba gets off the canvas, why wasn't he able to close the show on Chilemba? I think Andre Ward's going to win this fight. Right? The bottom line is, when you're on the fence like I am on this fight, on who's going to win, it's best to stay on the sidelines. So I'm going to follow your guidance on this one. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Right? Tell us who you think is going to win and why. I'll agree that Ward's going to take away a lot of Kovalev's gifts. Right? I think after Kovalev gets hit with some counters when he tries to jab to the body, I think that's going to leave his game. Then he's going to be chasing, trying to hit Andre in the head. We know that's hard to do. Right? The flip side, though, is, can Andre Ward be perfect for 12 rounds against a guy who is this dangerous? I thought Ike Chilemba looked good at times in his fight against Kovalev. He made one mistake. He was on the canvas. Go back and revisit that Bernard Hopkins fight. Hopkins is on the canvas, I believe, in the first or second rounds of that fight. Right? Hopkins gets hit with the right hand. It's one mistake, and he pays for it. Right? Let's face it, if Andre Ward hits the canvas early in this fight, there's going to be a buzz in the crowd. So, I'm on the fence. Tell all of us here where you are in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.